Would like to introduce lesson 33 from Ross, which is more on the weak verb, talking about first guttural weak verbs in the nifal, hifil, and hafal, second guttural weak verbs in the pil and the pual, third guttural weak verbs in the nifal, pil, and hithpael, third aleph verbs in the nifal, pil, pual, hif, feel, and hafal, and then the vocabulary. First of all, first guttural verbs. First guttural verbs have a predictable vowel change in their three-letter roots due to the presence of guttural letters. Well, first of all, in the nifal perfect and participle, first guttural verbs have prefix vowels segol and hataf segol under the first guttural letter, as illustrated by the verb aman or amain, to lean on. So here you have the perfect ne'eman, and that's the pattern that goes throughout there. The participle also has a preformative noon, ne'eman, with the kamatz as a long A instead of a short A in the participle form. But that ne'eh pattern goes all the way through. The rest of the forms in nifal of first gutturals will have the following pattern. You will have in the preformative, you would normally have in the nifal for the imperfect the preformative with a hirik, double the first consonant of the root, and then a kamatz, and then an e vowel, at least in the third masculine singular form. Well, you cannot double an aleph, so you will get compensatory lengthening instead. So instead of ye amain, it ends up being ye amain and te amain, and on down the list. It follows that same pattern. And then in the imperative form, that would be the same as the second persons, except drop the T, replace it with a hey, and that's the form that you actually get. The infinitive form, same sort of thing. Again, it should be a hey with a hirik and a double, but you can't do that. So you get hey amain, and then in the infinitive absolute, you get hey amon. In the hifil, the first guttural verbs in the hifil, the prefix hey tends to be pointed with a segol, and the guttural following with a hataf segol, kind of like the nifal perfect. So he caused to stand would be ne'emid. Normally it would be a hirik, hif-il, with a hirik and a shavah, but the guttural won't take a shavah, so you get a hataf segol. And then by vowel harmonization, you get a segol under the hey as well. Same thing with mean, he believed. You get a segol and a hataf segol. Now, when this form appears with a vav consecutive in a future narrative sequence, the prefix vowel ends up being a patah. So instead of getting the hey thing, you end up getting the vehamanti, and I shall believe. The hifil of amen means to believe. And again, you got two indications that this is a consecutive form. One, the accent on the first common singular shifts forward. Normally it would be recessed. And two, it also changes the vowel to an A vowel. Hifil imperfect, imperative, and infinitive absolute and participles all retain the vocalization pattern of the hifil. An A-class prefix vowel, patah, an I-class, either hirik yod or sere, as the next full vowel. So In the imperfect, you get ya'amid, again with the hataf patah here. Vav consecutive, same form except it goes from a hirik yod to a sere. So a vai yahamed instead of mead. Joseph is the same as the preterite form of the vav consecutive, yahamed. May he stand. And then the imperative would be the same as the imperfect except drop the T, and it would be hahamed. Again, it goes from the hirik yod to a sere. And likewise, the participle is ma'a with a hataf patah and a vowel. Infinitive construct, same sort of thing. Infinitive absolute, same sort of thing, except the construct is hirik yod and the infinitive absolute is sere instead. The hafal. All hafal first guttural verbs have composite shava under the guttural that corresponds to the kamatz hatuf of the prefix. So you should have had, theoretically, ha-mad for a haf-al form. Ha or ho-mad should be o-vowel here. And that still is an o-vowel. But then you get a hataf kamatz, an o-vowel kamatz in under the guttural. So it ends up being ho-mad. And then the imperfect, same thing, yohomad, and on down the list, the participle mod. This composite shava corresponds to the full short vowel of the kamatz hatuf when the vocalic suffixes are added. Here you have the form hohomad, but if you made it common plural, it would be theoretically ohomadu, but then you have two shavas in a row, and so the first one becomes the vowel of the half vowel, according to the rule of shava, and so you get ho-om-du. Move on to second guttural verbs. With second guttural verbs in the PL, the problem is going to come that the PL pattern calls for a doubling of the middle consonant of the root. However, you cannot double a guttural. And so if you have a guttural or a resh, it's going to be a problem when you try to double the middle consonant. Now, in the case of aleph, you will, for example, with ma'an, to refuse, if you make that into a PL, it would be me'ain. The PL would be an e-eh with an I and an E with a double. But you cannot double the aleph. It spits it out. The little dot lands over here and ends up being a sere, at least in my imagination, that's what happens. Or if you don't like my imaginative reconstruction, it compensatory lengthens the vowel from a short I to a long E. And it will do that regularly all the way through. Now there are some forms that call for a shava under the middle consonant in the third common plural perfect. And there you'll get a hataf patah under the aleph. With the imperfect, you should have a preformative with a shava under it, and then a patah that doubles the middle consonant under the second consonant. But again, you can't double an aleph, so you will compensatory lengthen instead. So with aleph, and by the way, the same thing would be true if you had a resh in the middle position, you would get compensatory lengthening all the way through. So here in all the imperfects, kamats, 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 kamats. With the imperative forms, same sort of thing. If you take the imperfect forms and drop the T, this same as the second masculine singular, well, you just get ma'ain, and that's exactly what you get, and ma'ani, and ma'anu, and ma'aina, but you get the kamats all the way through on all the imperative forms, because again, it should have been a patah and double the middle consonant, but because you can't double it, you compensatory lengthen instead. Oh, by the way, notice here, since the root ma'an ends with a noon, when you add the na ending, same thing here in the third feminine plural, same would be true of the second feminine plural, instead of writing the noon twice, you write it once and put a dog-ash in it. So one of the noons is the noon of the root ma'an, and the other one is the ending of the second feminine plurals, the na ending. Then you have the participle, same thing as the imperfect with a letter with a shavah under it, in this case a mem, and then it should be a patah and double, but you can't double, so you get compensatory lengthening, and when the serif reduces to shavah, it becomes a hataf patah because of the guttural. When you add the plural ending, it becomes a pretonic serif rule comes into play, and it ends up being a hataf patah. And the infinitive is the same as the infinitive absolute is the same as the imperative form. Now, other than aleph and resh, most other second gutturals, if it has a hey or a het or an ayin, will tend to virtual double rather than compensatory lengthening. And so if you look at ba'ar, to consume or kindle, if you make it into a PL, do it a lot, well, you get the EA pattern of the EL, PL. You should be doubling the ion, but you can't double the ion, but then you don't compensatory lengthen either, and this is called virtual doubling. And so all the way through on these perfect forms with a middle ion, you get virtual doubling. If you have a form that reduces the vowel under the middle consonant to a shavah, it ends up being a hataf patah. And then in the imperfects, it does the same thing. The ye ba'er is exactly the form that you would expect, but you just can't double the ion, but you don't lengthen the vowel under the bet either, and that is virtual doubling. Imperative, the same sort of thing. Participle, the same sort of thing. The infinitive, same form as the imperative. Infinitive construct, same sort of thing. Now, in the case of pu'al forms, you will get compensatory lengthening if you have a middle guttural, but it's going to take a kind of peculiar fashion of doing it. You will have a kibbutz as the form of the pu'al. You would have a kibbutz and a double, and then a patah. But in some cases where you do the compensatory lengthening, it goes from the short U, the kibbutz, to a long O. So you would expect it to be burad, having to do with being blessed, but it ends up being borad all the way through, which might be confusable with, say, a participle. And with the preformative, it would be a ye borak. I read that wrongly. Borak and ye borak. But all the way through, you get that O vowel in those forms. Most of the other forms will get virtual doubling where you just don't double the vowel.